There is an argument I see a lot around the internet when it comes to game spaces. Indie games are a poor value. The argument is that Dark Souls 2 at $60 USD contains substantially more content per dollar than a game like Gone Home, valued at $15. Typically, this is broken down by going to a game's How Long to Beat page, seeing the average playthrough length, and then just dividing that by the price. The common rate I see online is at most $1 per hour of content. By that metric, the average AAA game must be at least 60 hours long, which is just unfeasible under most circumstances. Most campaigns and games are still between 10 and 20, so the easy way to pad out a game is with an open world to trawl, New Game Plus content and bonuses, or you just make a whole lot of content for a multiplayer mode and assume most players will buy into that. But then there comes other problems. The consumer wants a ton of content for a disgustingly cheap price. Movie tickets are on average $10, for films on average 2 hours long. Novels run on average 8 hours long given national average reading times, but each one costs about $15. By this metric, video games are worth half as much to their own consumers as novels are by avid readers, or under a fifth of what a movie's worth to an avid moviegoer, which seems regressive, at least to my eyes. Video games are, to put it lightly, prestige art products. Even if a AAA game is entirely about war, about the bloodthirst of murder and violence, millions of dollars must be dispensed into the product to get it up to modern standards. We're talking art with complex PBR materials, intensive sound work, set and map design, careful choreography, hundreds of pages of writing to do, and thousands of individual components that must be assembled to bring a game to life. With this in mind, a prestige product should command a prestige price. I feel it worth mentioning that game prices have not changed much since as late as 1994. Donkey Kong Country cost $60 new, Mortal Kombat's tended towards $70, and older or less notable games ran the gambit of $20 to $40. That year, a movie ticket cost $4 on average, and a game could cost easily 10 times that amount. Nowadays, movies are more than double that price, but Donkey Kong's still asking for the same amount of cash even with the addition of a new funky mode. Hell, with subscription services like Microsoft's Game Pass, prices get even more troublesome. Players can get access to 484 titles at the time of writing for just $1 for their first month, and then $10 every subsequent month, or for $15 a month can access them on multiple devices, including the Xbox website as a cloud title. As a result, even if a player were to hold onto their Game Pass subscription on either PC or console for 1,000 months or 83 years, it's still cheaper to use Game Pass than to buy those games individually. Just 1 year of Game Pass works out to the cost of 2 AAA games, and many titles release day and date on Game Pass. Now, in lieu of sales, Game Pass publishers are paid up front for what Microsoft thinks the title is worth on Game Pass, and then developers can make additional money from microtransactions or DLC. For all developers, this is a helpful cushion. It's guaranteed income, which especially helps indie devs, as we saw with the early adopters of the Epic Games Store, though that's its own can of worms and I'm not going to talk about it too much. But it can also be really harmful to the public perception of how much a game is worth to consumers. Why buy an indie game for $15 if it's on Game Pass? But on the other side of the coin, is this profitable? I mean, for Microsoft, of course it is. They wouldn't do it if it wasn't. But for the other companies, is accepting a flat rate in exchange for losing sales from Game Pass users worth it? Heck, what does it take a video game to turn a profit? Well, the general rule of thumb is that modern AAA games run about $100 million. These numbers can fluctuate depending on the size of the team, the cost of rent and utilities for your office, how long the game's in development. We often lump these costs down to what's known as a man-month, and then that amount averages out to about $10,000 a month or $120 per developer per year. So we can imply the average AAA game runs about 10,000 man-months over a roughly 2-year period. Knowing these numbers, we can actually start calculating how much a game should cost to turn a profit. Say we want to start printing money after our 1 millionth sale and we're not going the route of a subscription service or microtransactions. 1 million sales is on par with the sales of Ratchet & Clank on PS5 or WarioWare Get It Together on the Switch. 1 million for a new IP is pretty big. So we need to make $100 million in 1 million sales. So we need to sell our game at $100, 40 more than we already sell them for. But wait, there's a problem here. We also have to pay our storefront. They take a cut too. Nintendo, Sony, and Steam are all on board with a 30% cut for each sale, though our numbers would be more favorable on the Microsoft Store or the Epic Games Store. We'll assume a 30% cut. We're going to sell our game on the PS5 and Steam. So that means that we need to make $100 after their 30% cut, so we divide $100 by 0.7 for our 70% share, and we get each game costing $142.85, or over double what games cost now. Oh, before I go, just one more thing. Your investors, the publishing arms and venture capitalists that funded your game, are looking for a return on their investment, and it's usually a 40% ROI at that. So if we want to do that in 1 million sales, we can just multiply our current price by 1.4, and oddly enough, it works out to an even $200. That's like half the cost of the console. If you bought a PS5 in the US for its MSRP of $500, you could then buy Ratchet & Clank, Ghostwire Tokyo, Gran Turismo, and now you've spent more on games than the console despite having just bought 3 games. Games are sold for pennies on the dollar for what they actually cost to develop, but that's why developers have implemented little tricks to get you to spend their additional total and improve their chances at making a profit. And before we move on from this topic, yes, obviously selling more copies lowers the amount we can sell the games at. If we could guarantee 5 million sales, we could sell our game for just $40. But one, not many games can hope to sell that amount, with many of even Nintendo's flagship franchises selling under 3 million. And two, getting people interested in a new IP nowadays is so difficult, and guaranteeing any amount of sales is next to impossible. Big name games have flopped, indie gems have outsold AAA titles, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has outsold Bloodborne. Now then, if we can't guarantee sales, how can we ensure a profit then? Well, you ever notice how, even though it can trace its roots back to the 90s, it was around the 7th generation that we started seeing a whole bunch of downloadable content? Rather than spending the time to program a whole new game, we can have some art people make a few guns, the programming team give them some tweaked numbers, the sound people can make some punchy new sound effects, and then we can cut a trailer and sell the McShay weapon pack for $3. If you've been around the block on this channel, you might be familiar with the juggernaut that is Payday 2. The game has seen better days. I have 2 long-winded essays on that particular topic, but despite the ups and downs, the game still gets updates and continues to receive paid DLC. This is a cheap and relatively easy way to keep people spending on a game while giving them legitimate reasons to keep spending, as this allows for opportunities or new experiences and new ways to interact with games. This can become an issue with long-runner titles though, as if you look at the DLC that The Sims 4 offers, yeah, that's pretty daunting as a new player. The general vibe becomes that as the total value of all the content rises, the base game becomes a worse and worse value. What was once maybe more than half of all the content in the game is now just a very tiny sliver. And if a game suffers from power creep, that base content can prove to be useless in the long run, which makes players of the base game feel worse off. So maybe that answer becomes using this tactic for cosmetic items only. We've seen that in action significantly more frequently these past few years, especially given the rise and subsequent fall of loot boxes. These offered a single randomized item pulled from a weighted list. More desirable items are rarer and thus appear less frequently, and less interesting content like spray decals or recolors become more common. The loot box can trace its lineage to at least Team Fortress 2's Manco crate system, where a player received many crates that contained one rare item each, but had to pay $2.50 to open one. That system was streamlined in later years, made most infamous by Overwatch. You got a crate every level up and additional crates for partaking in seasonal events or other similar means. And if you wanted more opportunities to obtain rare items or even just stuff for a character you like, you had to buy more loot boxes. Because of their weighted tier system incentivizing opening more and more boxes as your next legendary could be right around the corner, this system is technically legal gambling. Many countries have banned the practice, and others are required to disclose the exact odds of receiving these items, as they effectively function as an in-game lottery, even if you do win every time. Yes, the candy claw machine at the mini golf I frequented as a kid also offers up a winner every time, but a chalky, stale candy bracelet and a stale Tootsie Roll are not desirable prizes. I want the watermelon airhead, damn it. Likewise, a player icon or a spray for a character you don't play are not desirable prizes. You technically got something for every loot box, but you're not going to use most of it. It's junk. The system that followed the loot boxes, popularized by Fortnite, was the Battle Pass. You paid an in-game currency to access a level-up pass that then allowed you to cash in levels for cosmetic items or that in-game currency. If you couldn't afford the pass, you could buy the currency. Otherwise, a small handful of level-ups would offer free players that premium good, which meant that a free player could hypothetically work their way up to getting all the premium rewards in a season's pass, which in theory meant the system was fixed. I should actually backtrack to DLC at this point. A Season Pass typically contained all of the game's DLC, but around this time period, Season Pass started meaning a Battle Pass. Games would have a few seasons a year, and each one had a pass full of premium and free cosmetics or just items. Around this time, we also started seeing DLC do a similar run, usually in the form of a Year 1 pass, with the implication being that any future DLC that came out would not be awarded. You'd have to buy it a la carte or buy a second pass. Borderlands 2 actually did a variant of this earlier than most of the industry, with Digistruct Peak and the Headhunter content not included in the Season Pass, which otherwise included all of the other DLC. So that Season Pass is different from the current Season Pass, which is a Battle Pass. They have their own issues. Free players get very few items, and modern games place heavy emphasis on cosmetics as a means of self-expression. Players who don't spend don't get many opportunities to be themselves, with Fortnite juggling between a number of generic commando characters of varying skin tone and gender. This can make free players feel ostracized, as they don't have a stable character to find themselves in, whereas their premium friends are always Master Chief, or Goku, or Rick Sanchez, or a Chicago Bear. What's going on in Fortnite? But additionally, Season Passes encourage players to overindulge in a game, as unlocking all of the pass's content requires leveling up dozens of times over a few short months. For a free player to acquire all of their allotted items in a battle pass, they must level up 90 times, and each Fortnite season lasts just 12 weeks at most, meaning a player has to level up at least once per day to see all their content by the end. And as they increase in level, the amount of experience to level up increases geometrically, so it might take hours upon hours to hit a level by the end. You might have to spend the entire night in Fortnite. Halo Infinite has a similar level up system, but the amount of experience gained is very paltry compared to its competitors, and a lot of the content is junk, like decals for specific weapons or vehicles, so it often doesn't feel worth it to invest in the game's pass. Even in the ones that are better about this, a number of players just do not care enough about looks to want to hoard cosmetics, and thus they just won't buy into the pass, so the publisher cannot get any money from those players. So you just start locking game content behind seasonal events. Fortnite's PvE mode, Save the World, is an additional purchase, and nobody actually really looks into the mode itself because the Battle Royale is far and away more popular. Destiny 2 recently required players to either purchase the Bungie Anniversary Pack or the Witch Queen Deluxe Edition in order to play the dungeons included in the Witch Queen. That is to say, if you bought the base version of that DLC, you then had to buy DLC for your DLC. Witch Queen was a $40 expansion, with the Deluxe Edition costing an extra $40 on top of that, just to play all the content in that year's expansion, which was not included in that seasonal expansion's DLC. CSGO's Operation Riptide is a paid expansion to the free game that includes new modes, including the ability to privately queue with an entire Steam group, who then filter in and out of your matches so you can play with more than a few friends at a time. And while in both cases there's no signs that either will be taken offline, Destiny 2 notoriously delisted and removed several expansions worth of content, including the base campaign, in an attempt to keep the file size low, but there's no ability for players to then reinstall them. Bungie says their vaulting days are behind them, but who's to say at this point? But how does any and all of this relate to indie games being so expensive? Well, let's just take a look at an indie that attempted to fight in this space. Totally Accurate Battlegrounds was a goofy meme game full of flailing limbs, but over time has become a marginally more respected game, complete with its own cosmetic shop and pass system. The issue, though, is that Landfall Games doesn't have the financial backing of Activision or Epic or EA. On January 1st, 2022, Landfall discontinued Totally Accurate Battlegrounds, and the game is set to not receive any more updates, with the company taking in more money from their paid-for, smaller experiences. They tried to compete in a world where AAA games are massive and bloated with content to keep people spending. But that requires a ton of upfront costs that indies just can't compete with. And that brings us back to that man-month math. A big studio like EA can have over 10,000 employees, and the money from game sales isn't broken up between them evenly. An accounting department manages employee salaries and their coffers from game sales. Battlefield 5 could have been a billion seller, but its devs wouldn't have been paid any more. In fact, many employees in AAA spaces are freelance contract employees who are let go around the launch of the game, and staff members not kept around for post-launch support are typically moved on to other projects. Simply put, if you were to, I don't know, acquire that Harry Potter game coming up, that's not going to hurt the employees. They've already been paid for their labor. They have the funds to keep paying salaries independent from individual sales of their games. And so many hands are in their pie that your one sale might only be worth fractions of a cent to even the company pocketbook at the end of the day, after having paid outsourcing houses, middleware vendors, investors, and more. But where that money can help tremendously is in indie games. Games made by a small team, maybe a few people, maybe even just one. A single sale produces actionable results for indies as they don't have venture capitalists to pay off or Chinese asset houses to compensate. Sure, a 15 game might only be worth about $10 to them after the storefront takes their cut, but that's $10 going right into somebody's pocket. There's a trend in economics known as the velocity of money. Your $15 is turned into $10.50, which an indie dev can then use to pay for groceries at a store. That can then be given as cash back to someone who needs their driveway seal coated. The seal coater can then pay for the oil change on their truck, and the mechanic can buy a new shirt or get a new haircut with that money as well. And then the person who made the shirt or did the haircut can then spend that $10 on another game and just keep the cycle going. That few bucks can be spent several times over in a week. Your $15, if spent on a AAA game on a steep discount, will statistically end up in part or even in majority in the CEO's bank account, where he might buy a super yacht, or it'll just sit there for months, years even. Best case scenario, it ends up in the hands of middleware devs who can spend it on market research or an outsourcing company's budget to buy more computers or hire more employees. Money tends to flow fastest down low in the hands of regular folks like you and I than it does in big business. Sure, more money flows in big business, but it's done in slow lump sums. It's not this fast-flowing exchange of goods and services like you see down low. That's really it. Indie games are more expensive for their content because those are actual devs, actual artists and musicians and writers who you're helping fund directly. A $10 purchase can mean the difference between whether they pay their rent on time or it takes a few more days. $20 can mean the difference between eating canned vegetables again or being able to buy fresh. You get a handcrafted small project from someone deeply passionate about their craft, and there's no shame in putting it down once you're done. It's like a novel or a movie. It's not this sprawling ocean of cosmetic gubbins and wacky dances. But in an age where nearly every AAA game seems to be going the route of barely disguised Skinner boxes with interchangeable FPS or action gameplay, where the fear of missing out drives sales, miss out. If this year's Call of Duty is effectively just last year's with a new theme, you don't need to buy it. Indie devs are dying for your business, and $60 can go a long way with helping them with their art. If you liked this video and you'd like to see more, I'd recommend subscribing. Coffee and social media links are in the description.